What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our SEC football channel. We've previewed every SEC team schedule for 2020 and also given you a projected record for each team in the SEC. Now we're going to look at what the standings could potentially look like if those projections were true. And I want to be clear here, these are not our predictions. Our predictions will not come until the summer. This is just a projection based off of recent history, what these teams have coming back, and how tough their schedule is. So this is what we think that they should do versus their schedule. If they're better than maybe we think, then they're going to do a little better than this or worse than this, but it's not an official prediction. Our prediction might look kind of close to this, but I can already tell you there will be some differences. So let's just jump right into it, and we'll start with the SEC East. Given these projections, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and watch all the individual team videos and you can see those projections. But based off of these projections, Georgia would win the SEC East. They would have one loss. Don't know who that loss would be to, because we're not projecting every individual game. We're just kind of grouping them together with the percentage chance that the team would have to win. And again, go back and watch the individual videos if you don't know what I'm talking about. But Georgia would be 7-1, 11-1 overall. They would win the SEC East based off of these projections. Florida 6-2, a 10-2 overall record. So once again, the Gators would come up just short here in the East by one game. And it really wouldn't matter who won the Georgia-Florida game in this scenario, because even if Florida beat Georgia, if they've got two other losses, they're not going to win the East. And I think I would be very surprised if Florida beats Georgia. I would be very surprised if they had two losses to other teams and they didn't win the East. So, if you were just kind of playing this out, you'd probably say Georgia beat Florida. Tennessee comes in at number 3 at 5-3 in the SEC, 8-4 overall. That means, based off of the numbers, the projections, they would lose that game to Oklahoma in the non-conference. Kentucky and Missouri tie at 3-5. There's no tiebreakers here because, again, we're not projecting individual games. Missouri has a very soft schedule. That's why I think they came out to be 3-5 and 7-5 overall. You give them a little tougher schedule. I think Missouri probably would have been a little bit lower. South Carolina came out 2-6, 5-7 overall. So once again, a bowl, not going to a bowl game for South Carolina. And then Vanderbilt 2-6, 5-7. I think that's a little bit generous. When I look at Vanderbilt's schedule, honestly, I have a hard time finding any wins in the SEC. So 5-7 overall might be a little bit generous there for Vanderbilt. But again, these are just projections, not our predictions. But it does kind of line up with, I think, what most people are expecting from the SEC East this season. Most people expect Georgia and Florida to be at the top, and then Tennessee probably to be that number 3 team. I think Kentucky could give Tennessee a run for their money to be that number 3 team. I think those are the top 4. And then there's a battle with Missouri and South Carolina and Vanderbilt. I kind of feel like Vanderbilt should be at the bottom. Missouri, South Carolina, kind of tough to figure out. I think South Carolina has more potential. We'll see what happens with that. So that's what the East looks like. Let's now go to the West. And we have a 3-way tie in the West with Alabama, LSU, and Texas A&M. All 3 teams going 6-2, 10-2 overall. That is what the projection shows. And that would be pretty wild. Again, we don't have the individual games, so I can't really say who would win the tiebreaker. But I do know if you go down the list in the SEC, the tiebreaker goes to, like, if one of these teams beat the other 2 teams, then they would be number 1 because you go to head-to-head first. But let's say each team loses to each of the other teams once, or we have to go down the list of the tiebreakers. It would go to the record of the cross-division opponents for each team. And I think Alabama would probably win that because you have Georgia and Tennessee on the schedule. So if it did come down to this, if it did come down to a 3-way tie, I believe Alabama would have the toughest schedule against the East, assuming Tennessee does what we expect them to do and has a pretty good season. But anyways, just for this video, it's a 3-way tie. Alabama, LSU, Texas A&M. A clear separation with those 3 teams and Auburn. Most people would probably put Auburn and Texas A&M around the same area, but it's the schedule. Texas A&M's schedule is much easier than Auburn's. That's why they come out to be 6-2. Auburn just 4-4. A&M does not have to play Georgia, so that's a big part of it. And that again, would show Auburn going 4-4, 8-4 overall. And then interesting with Ole Miss and Mississippi State, both teams 6-6 overall, but Ole Miss would have the better conference record and actually be 3-5. I believe that would project them to lose the game to Baylor. Mississippi State doesn't really have a tough test in the non-conference. So both of those teams squeak into a bowl game. Not a lot of room for error, but Ole Miss would finish ahead of Mississippi State in the SEC standings, in the conference standings. And then Arkansas would finish at 1-7, 4-8 overall. And keep in mind, these numbers are conservative. You're not going to have a bunch of undefeated teams. You're not going to have a bunch of teams with 1 or 2 wins. The way these projections work, they are conservative. And it's just kind of based off, again, the general odds for each team to win each game. And it would be interesting if this did happen, if we did have a 3-way tie in the SEC West. And what if one of these teams, whoever won the West, let's say Alabama, what if they beat Georgia in the SEC East, in the SEC Championship? Would they get to the college football playoff with 2 losses? That would be an interesting discussion there as well. But it does look like, you got probably a 2-team race in the East, maybe a 3-team race in the West. Most people think it's Alabama, maybe LSU. I don't think many people are considering Texas A&M. But when you look at their schedule, when you look at what they have coming back, I think they're in that discussion. And I think it's going to be a really interesting race there in the West. And then I think, again, Georgia and Florida, really it's going to come down to that one game to determine the SEC East. But these are not our predictions, just projections. You guys let me know what you think about these projections down in the comments below. Of course, our predictions will be coming after spring, probably in May or June, somewhere in there. We'll start going through all of the teams. But thank you guys for watching this video, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports SEC Football Channel.